Today is Tuesday, July 7th. Welcome to Big Book Daily. My name is Rob. I am an alcoholic. It is a thrill, honor, and joy to be here with you today as we journey through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Today out of the Big Book, we are on the Doctor's Opinion, Roman numeral 31. We'll read the first couple of paragraphs. Out of the 12 and 12, we're cutting ahead a little bit. I couldn't just not go without a reading today in the 12 and 12. So we're going to read the first two paragraphs of Step 1 today, which would be page 21 of the 12 and 12. And of course, we'll read the Just for Today, Encouraged to Change readings. So with that, hope y'all are doing well this morning, my friends. Life is good over here. Got a giant cup of coffee in my Ninja Turtles cup. I got my fur balls with me. And I woke up another day sober. That's a great start to the day right there. So with that, let's go ahead and get to the good stuff. So if you recall from yesterday's reading out of the Big Book, we were talking about how, well, actually the last few days, where Dr. Silkworth mentions the mental obsession and also the physical or the phenomenon of craving or the physical allergy. That as soon as we finally decide to take that drink, when that alcohol hits our body, we're off to the races, right? That triggers the allergy. And he also talks about how, as much consternation as it might cause, that he and the majority of his physicians believed that total abstinence was the only solution for alcoholics. And that sounds pretty dire, right? So on page Roman numeral 31, we're going to see two great examples of the miracle of AA and the program. The first one, and I had to do a little bit of digging here, was a man named Hank Parkhurst, who a lot of people refer to him as the AA number 2 in the New York AA group. And what's fascinating about Hank is the fact that he wrote to employers the chapter for that, and it's a pretty powerful chapter, very practical as well. And he also wrote a personal story in the first edition in 1939 called The Unbeliever. And I believe a long time ago, we read that story. I think it's one of the first in the back of the first edition. That's the first person, Hank, and he was very close with Bill and Lois. And then the second person that's mentioned is a man named Fitz Mayo, who would eventually become a member of Alcoholics Anonymous as well. He is the man in the barn, as it is referred to in this page. And he would go on to write Our Southern Friend in the Pioneers of AA. It's still in the 4th edition, and it's a powerful chapter. And I remember, I think that's the one that, where he questions himself and says, "Who are you to say there is no God?" So pretty powerful stuff. We're going to see two dire examples here. And I think eventually we're going to, by the end of this chapter, see the conclusion of what happened to Fitz Mayo. So anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and read Roman numeral 31. What is the solution? Perhaps I can best answer this by relating one of my experiences. About 1 year prior to this experience, a man was brought in to be treated for chronic alcoholism. He had but partially recovered from a gastric hemorrhage and seemed to be a case of pathological mental deterioration. He had lost everything worthwhile in life and was only living, one might say, to drink. He frankly admitted and believed that for him there was no hope. Following the elimination of alcohol, there was found to be no permanent brain injury. He accepted the plan outlined in this book. 1 year later, he called to see me, and I experienced a very strange sensation. I knew the man by name and partially recognized his features, but there all resemblance ended. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck had emerged a man brimming over with self-reliance and contentment. I talked with him for some time, but was not able to bring myself to feel that I had known him before. To me, he was a stranger, and so he left me. A long time has passed with no return to alcohol. When I need a mental uplift, I often think of another case brought in by a physician prominent in New York. The patient made his own diagnosis, deciding his situation hopeless. Had hidden in a deserted barn, determined to die. He was rescued by a searching party, and in desperate condition, brought to me. Following his physical rehabilitation, he had a talk with me in which he frankly stated that he thought the treatment was a waste of effort, unless I could assure him, which no one ever had, that in the future he would have the willpower to resist the impulse to drink. His alcoholic problem was so complex, and his depression so great, that he felt his only hope would be through what we then called moral psychology, and we doubted if even that would have any effect. Out of the 12 and 12, we are on step 1. So how this works, again, as the foreword talked about, is we get a breakdown of every one of the steps. And based on several years of experience between the publication of the big book, and by the time this was written in 1950, or at least compiled in 1950 and published, we get the traditions. So the majority of the book is about the steps, and it's a great breakdown of each one. And then we'll get the traditions later. So we're on step 1. This is page 21. We are going to read the first 2 paragraphs. Step 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Who cares to admit complete defeat? Practically no one, of course. Every natural instinct cries out against the idea of personal powerlessness. It is truly awful to admit that, glass in hand, we have warped our minds into such an obsession for destructive drinking that only an act of providence can remove it from us. No other kind of bankruptcy is like this one. Alcohol, now become the rapacious creditor, bleeds us of all self-sufficiency and all will to resist its demands. Once this stark fact is accepted, our bankruptcy as going human concerns is complete. NA just for today, July 7th. One aspect of our spiritual awakening comes through the new understanding of our higher power that we develop by sharing another addict's recovery. Basic text, page 52. We've heard it said that we often see God most clearly in one another. We see the truth of this when we practice our 12th step. When we carry the recovery message to another addict, we sense the presence of a power greater than ourselves. And as we watch the message take hold, we realize something else. It's the message that brings recovery, not the messenger. A higher power, not our own power, is a source of that change that begins when we carry the message to a still suffering addict. As the message does its work, transforming the life of another addict, we see a higher power in action. We watch as acceptance and hope replace denial and despair. Before our very eyes, the first traces of honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness begin to appear. Something's happening inside this person. Something bigger and more powerful than either of us. We're watching the God that we've come to understand at work in someone's life. We see the higher power in them, and we know with greater certainty than ever that this higher power is in us too, as the force driving our recovery. Just for today, as I carry the message of recovery to other addicts, I will try to pay attention to the power behind the message. Today, as I watch other alcoholics recover, I will try to recognize the God in them so that I can better recognize the God in myself. Al-Anon's Courage to Change, July 7th. I thought that in every conflict, in every confrontation, someone was invariably at fault. It was essential to assign blame, and I would stew for hours weighing the evidence. I became a chronic scorekeeper. Because I approached every situation with this attitude, I was consumed by guilt and anger. Defensive and anxious, I made sure my own back was always covered. Al-Anon helps me understand that disputes come up even when everyone is doing their best. Obsessively reviewing everyone's behavior focuses my attention where it doesn't belong, and it keeps me too busy to have any serenity. Instead, I can consider the part that I have played. If I have made mistakes, I am free to make amends. Today, I know that conflict is not necessarily an indication that someone is wrong. Difficulties may just arise. Sometimes people simply disagree. Today's reminder. Today, I accept that each life has its share of conflict. It is not my job to document every such incident. Instead of wringing my hands and pointing my finger, I can consider the possibility that everything is happening exactly as it should. Sometimes, blame is just an excuse to keep busy so that I don't have to feel the discomfort of my powerlessness. Quote from Josiah Holland, "The mind grows by what it feeds on." All right, my friends, that concludes today's reading and some beautiful stuff. I love in step 1 here. I mean, it's the foundation step. And I've heard it said many times. I think it's in the big book as well. Or maybe it's in the 12 and 12 where they talk about it. But the only step that we should try our best to get 100% right is step 1. The rest of the steps are perfect ideals that we can strive toward, like that North Star, right? But step 1 is the foundation. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. You know, it took me a long time to admit that, because in my mind, I thought my life's not unmanageable. I've not served jail time. I've not destroyed my marriage. I've not done this and that. I've not done, I'm not homeless living under a bridge. These surface level things, right? But guess what? My life was unmanageable. And I was going down the track where all those things I just mentioned were in my future. And worse. How many times had I gotten in a car drunk? I was on borrowed time. I could have killed myself, or even worse, I could have killed somebody else. My marriage was in shambles. My wife was going to leave, and if I continued to drink, I guarantee you that would happen. I would serve jail time or be in an institution or dead. That's where my life was headed. And my whole life revolved around a drink. It revolved around a drink. All I cared about was having the next drink. And as soon as I would have that drink and put it in my body, boom, here comes a physical allergy. And of course, I didn't know these things at the time. I was powerless over it. Because how many times did I wake up saying, I'm not gonna drink today. Today is the day I quit. Right after a hangover or whatever. And then before long, the mental obsession. The rationalizations kick in. Well, Rob, you feel really guilty for the way you behaved yesterday. You feel a lot of shame. You don't want to feel that right now, do you? Why don't you have another drink? Or, well, Rob, hey, there's nothing else to do. Why don't you have another drink? Hey, Rob, you're not an alcoholic, man. You're just depressed. You know what'll help you with that emotion? Have a drink. Then I have a drink. Boom, kickstarts my physical allergy. All I want to do is drink some more, chase that feeling, that fleeting feeling. And before long, I'm repeating that exact same cycle over and over again. So you betcha, I was powerless over alcohol. And my life had become unmanageable. It was ruled by the drink. And it was destroying every facet of my life. And as I said just a second ago, if I go back out and drink again, those things could be in my future. Easily. And what I learned when I finally came into the rooms was that folks who had been homeless or had served jail time, had gotten in a car and wrecked their car, or even, heaven forbid, killed someone, the way they described their alcoholism is exactly the way I think about alcoholism. So there is no doubt in my mind, I am an alcoholic, and I always will be. But guess what? The beautiful thing is, that sounds like a morbid statement, right? The beautiful thing is exactly what the NA reading was talking about. When I walk into the rooms and I look around, I see all these people that are just like me. Maybe, on the surface, completely different, right? But they have the same disease that I do, and the same solution. And the beautiful thing about it is, yes, we have the program, but I see my higher power through every person who shares. And as the NA reading says, real quick, and I'll hush, it's not the messenger. It's the beautiful message itself of AA. And our higher power through the message of AA. I have to remember that. A lot of times when I would sponsor and somebody would go back out, I would blame myself. Or on the other hand, and this hasn't happened to me much, but on the other hand, if I was working with somebody and they're sober, I don't need to be patting myself on the back, going, "Look, good job, Rob. Look what you did." No, it was the message. It was the program of recovery and a demonstration of my higher power that did this. It's not me. Thankfully, all I have to be concerned about is helping to carry the message. But it's the spiritual awakening and the message itself that does the saving. Beautiful stuff. But my friends, I have rambled on way over. I hope you all have a great one today. Please know, as always, I don't speak on behalf of AA, NA, Al-Anon. I am just a joyful drunk in this lifeboat of recovery. And if we are given another set of 24 hours, my friends, I sincerely look forward to seeing you right back here tomorrow.